The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So what happened in the 2024 election from a ballot integrity perspective? Did the changes in the laws that were made in the swing states make a material difference, or was it just simply too big to rig, as President-elect Trump said to Kristen Welker in that sit-down he did on Meet the Press last weekend? Well, for more on this, let's talk to the guy we talked to all throughout the election campaign, throughout the campaign season, and the run-up to the election, who was writing point on these issues of ballot security and election integrity. Ken Cuccinelli is the national chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative. He's also the former Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia and former Deputy Secretary of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, as well. Ken, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always good to be with you guys.
So what was the story? Too big to rig, or a combination of too big to rig and substantive reforms on the matter of election administration that improved the quality of said administration in some states?
I think it was the latter. It was the combination. If you're part of the reason there was less controversy around this election was Donald Trump solidly won it across the board. It wasn't 4 out of 7 swing states. It was all 7. And so people, when you look at the data after 16, 20, and 24, after 2016, over 50% of Democrats didn't believe Trump had actually won the election legally and fairly. After 2024, not surprisingly, over 50% of Republicans didn't think that Joe Biden had won the race legally and fair, myself included. But after 2024, that number is below 50% for Democrats. And Scott Rasmussen, longtime pollster, actually had the wisdom to ask what are called open-ended questions, where he just asked people, why do you think that? And he found a heavy skew toward, I can't believe anybody would vote for a guy with 34 felonies. I can't believe, they had it was really just a disbelief basis for it. So it really suggests that the election transparency measure that we use, and that is that the losers are satisfied with the outcome, meaning they accept the outcome, not that they're happy about it,
right,
has been achieved more after 2024 than any time in the last 3 election cycles. So we did do things better.
Now, that's not to say it was uniform, and I know you're not saying that.
No.
And my questions immediately go to Wisconsin and Michigan. Even though Trump won both of those states, there's a feeling that there was that ballot dump in the wee hours of Wednesday morning, and it made the difference for the Democrat Senate candidates in those 2 states.
There are also issues in North Carolina and, of course, nationally, most famously in Pennsylvania, where Democrats literally went into court and argued that unregistered voters' votes should be counted. That is not a joke, folks. They actually argued that. Now, to their credit, their very partisan left-wing Supreme Court rejected that argument. So even a blind squirrel stumbles across a nut every once in a while. Or more accurately, I think they just overreached so far that even their allies can't give it to them. We have a lot more work to do in states like Pennsylvania. Arizona counted incredibly slowly, especially what they call, no joke, this is really the name, late early ballots, which are a huge logistical nightmare down there. And we're going to work, hopefully across the aisle, because we'll have to with Governor Hobbs, to get that either eliminated or carved back substantially so Arizona will count faster, significantly faster next time. And Pennsylvania, speaking of Pennsylvania, is one of the swing states that doesn't do pre-processing of ballots, so it took forever to count there. None of them are as pathetic as California,
Right.
but for a state that has feces all over its sidewalks, I think slow vote counting isn't quite going to get them to enough embarrassment to fix it.
Well,
so we're
wait,
not really bothering with California.
Wait, go back to Michigan and Wisconsin, though, that I asked about, because I want your opinion on whether or not you think those Senate races were snaked from the Republicans.
I don't think they were. The ballot drops that you're talking about were ones that were relatively expected in terms of how they count. They do pre-processing there. I'm more suspicious, by the way, of Michigan than I am of Wisconsin. And because they do that pre-processing, when they do the ballot counts for those early votes that are done in particular, they're all going to come in at once. So it wasn't a surprise that there was a ballot dump. One of the big questions, because we're doing a much better job of turning out earlier votes, largely because President Trump finally endorsed it. The question was, okay, would our election day vote drop by an equal amount? And that didn't happen. We actually got more voters to the polls for Republicans in general, including in Michigan and Wisconsin especially. I would say that Michigan in the last 2 years, since the Democrats took sole control in 22, they have very intentionally and methodically gone through their election laws and made them terrible. They got rid of audits, they got rid of oversight, they got rid of citizens' ability to watch the process, and they did all that very intentionally. So they were clearly clearing the way for their allies to cheat, but Donald Trump won by enough, and there was enough transparency and oversight that they couldn't steal it.
Wow. What about
in Michigan, of course, you have, this is where personnel matters too. So thinking about elections and midterm elections at the state level, Jocelyn Benson is the Paul Masson of Secretaries of State, right? She will count no votes before it's time. And Dana Nussel, the Attorney General, will turn a blind eye to it. So, Michigan, where they actually have very competitive races in terms of control of the state legislature, that's an area where you want to look at the state level for midterm elections as well as the federal.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and that is something that we do at the Election Transparency Initiative. Is we do have a super PAC. We do engage in state races. Jocelyn Benson is arguably the worst Secretary of State in the country in terms of her aggressive undermining of law. She's a Soros-funded Secretary of State, and she fits that mold just fine. I'd say that people don't react as much to Secretaries of State, but the Soros-funded prosecutors have not been doing well around the country. Even referenda in California rolled back some of the Soros soft on crime initiatives. So even California was undoing some of that Soros work. And of course, they got rid of Gascon in LA. So you can see evidence all around the country that his approach that he's trying to impose through a lot of money of radical left-wingers is really, when voters focus on it and live with it, they don't like it. But the election administration is so esoteric, I'm not sure so many people vote on it and respond to it with the same visceralness they do to something like an explosion of crime on their streets. It isn't reacted to the same way by voters. I wish it were, because these elections are the cornerstone of our constitutional republic. And as you note, it isn't just presidential races, it's Senate races, it's state legislative races, and so forth. So we have a lot of improvement that was made from 2020, but we have a lot more work to do. And one of my foci is to make sure that this very large and diverse right of center coalition that's been working to improve elections continues doing it. The left has been doing this systematically for 20 years, regardless of who's running for what. And we on the right really close the gap in a lot of areas in matching their presence in the election process, and litigation is one high-profile way you see that. And we need to continue that really forever. This is not a thing you ever lay down your arms on.
Yeah. First, two questions for you. Are they done counting votes in California?
Yeah, they are. Good grief. It took them into December to actually supposedly get to the end, which in a presidential year, when you have a December 11th hard certification date because of the Electoral College, they literally only left about a week for court challenges. It's just pathetic, absolutely pathetic.
All right. And then what is this late early ballot going on in Arizona? Can you explain that?
Yeah. Sure. So in Arizona, it is pre-2020, mail voting was quite popular. Part of what they consider mail voting is this late early voting. Gosh, I don't know why they call it that, but they do. Where you walk into the polling place with your completed mail ballot package and you just drop it off and leave. And so this is a popular way to vote in Arizona, but it's a logistical nightmare, particularly since they got rid of precinct voting. So Maricopa County is about half the population of the state or so, and you can drop your late early ballot package off anywhere in the county. And so they have to organize that. They have to make sure you obviously didn't vote on a machine, and they have to do the processing. And because so many people do this on Election Day, and everybody's basically busy on Election Day, that for a huge chunk of their votes, the counting doesn't begin for days. And the counting doesn't begin for days because they first have to pre-process all of these. They have to make sure you signed your envelope correctly and you dated it correctly and you're a legal voter, and they have to do all those things. So some of us are going to be in Arizona this year trying to utilize their embarrassment. Many of them are embarrassed at their performance, to argue that they should get rid of this late early voting. If you're going to mail in vote, you mail in vote. If you walk into the polling place, friggin' vote on a machine.
Right. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
The prospect for standard setting at the federal level, especially with the narrow House majority, are there things that you're going to push for the Congress to do to establish at least some semblance of standards when it comes to at least the administration of federal elections at the state level? And maybe that will be normative in impact and make some states like Arizona consider how they administer state level elections as well. But what is the push at the federal level going to be for, national voter ID, for example? What other things?
So the first push will be to give a real tools and really requirements for the states to ensure citizenship, U.S. citizenship, to be clear, for voting in federal elections. Right now, that's the law, but there's no way to enforce it. And federal court rulings, including one authored by Justice Scalia, have really made it logistically impossible or very difficult for states to confirm citizenship. And this is the SAVE Act that you may have noticed in September. Speaker Johnson advanced, and his leadership was very helpful in this space. 5 Democrats in the House voted for it in an election year. I have a funny feeling after this past election, when they run it again, my prediction is 40 Democrats are going to vote for it in the House. And with those kinds of numbers, it would seem to me you have a good chance of getting over the threshold of a filibuster in the Senate. So citizenship confirmation and real ability and requirement to do that on the part of the states, I think, is going to be the number one priority. So many problems in elections come from screwed up federal laws, Motor Voter, Help America Vote Act. They all have had impacts that hurt election transparency, election security. And so we don't so much need to pass brand new federal laws as fix the ones on the books, because they haven't worked right. And so that's going to be our focus, because we don't want to introduce the idea of a federal takeover of elections, which the Democrats tried to do with their H.R. 1. We don't want to set that precedent so that when they come back into power someday, that they can just wipe out every state's election law. The variety in state election laws is actually a benefit to security for the United States. I can tell you from my DHS perspective days, Department of Homeland Security. And we don't want to interfere with that. The states have run our elections since the founding, and we want to keep it that way. But we do want to fix the federal screw-ups that have gotten in the way of good elections. And Trump has said, he's gone farther than what I just said. President Trump has said he wants, 1 day of voting, no early voting. I assume he still means for excuse absentee. But all of those, the constitutional authority exists for the federal government to impose those if they want to. But a lot of that strikes me as difficult to get to the 60 votes you need in the Senate.
Ken Cuccinelli, National Chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative, former AG of the state of Virginia, and former Deputy Secretary of DHS, as he mentioned as well. Ken, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's always good to be with you guys. Have a great weekend.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer
Hallelujah! Holy
on AM 560.
Where's the Tylenol?
The Answer.
This is Sean Thompson here to tell you about our 2024 Food for the Poor campaign. We've partnered with Food for the Poor once again to provide life-saving food for thousands of children and their families in Latin America and the Caribbean. We're talking about a part of the world that continues to suffer from the effects of